because of their exposure to the workplace, because of their exposure to the media, to new ideas, to what they see is happening all over the world. Unfortunately, the attitude and behavior of men and boys in this country is not changing. And that is going to create a problem. But that does not mean that you hold the girls back. It means that we need to have gender-focused programs for boys. There is no gender training of boys. There is very little gender training of male teachers, of male staff, of organizations which are run by men. We have conducted a number of trainings on gender to point out this issue, that gender is not simply an issue for women. It is an issue for men and for women.
Yeah, actually another question is, we talk about gender. We had a few news about Karachi. In girls' colleges, there are male staff, and they don't feel safe. What do you think about that? If someone doing his duty in male is doing duty in female schools or female colleges, do you think it is right or wrong?
No, I think they should be there. Why should they not be there? We don't want a segregated society. After all, women are going to come out and work. They are going to bring up both boys and girls as their children. We don't want so much segregation because I think the more the segregation, the greater the violence. The greater the violence. And the point is, you need to have rules. For example, the Higher Education Commission prepared a gender document, a gender policy document, which was circulated to all universities and institutions of higher learning on what was expected to be the code that people should follow, that there should be no sexual harassment, what should be the behavior of the male teachers, of the staff, and so on. Unfortunately, when we go to universities and colleges, many of them say, oh, we've received no such document.
Yeah.
So there is a resistance to this whole issue. This problem is also arising in schools where female teachers have been given the option that they can also teach in boys' schools, where you may find one female teacher and she is surrounded by her male colleagues. This issue arises in the Department of Education. After all, you cannot have two departments of education, one for men and one for women. So this segregation is not the answer. I think we have to change the behavior and the attitude and the mindset.
Actually, yesterday I was reading a news, about Hijab University. There was a lecturer who was fired by management on these allegations.
Yes.
And I was reading that some political personalities making him to bringing in that department. What do you think about that? If political personalities are giving exerting pressures on these things?
Well, I think the biggest, one of the biggest hurdles in education is political pressure. Whether it is appointment of people, whether it is transfers, postings, hiring, firing, these issues. But let me also say this, that action is sometimes taken against quotes, people who they see as the more liberal and the more progressive in universities, and it is ignored when the same behavior is shown by people who belong to the more religious minded parties. So where there is this discrimination, then people say, oh, action was not taken in the case of so and so, and this person is being penalized because he is a progressive. But I think whoever does it, that person should be penalized.
My next question will be, how does the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the 25A and 18 constitutional amendment impacts girls' education?
Well, you see, the way it can impact education is that it is now a right to education.
Yeah.
Right? But we have many rights. The Universal Declaration of Education has been there. We have conducted several trainings on it. Today, education is there as a Right to Education Act which exists in India. You still have disparity and discrimination over there. We have now also have a Right to Education Act, I think, which is being written up at the moment. Generally, the government has given its agreement to the right to education, but it is for all children, for girls and for boys. The point is, how are you going to exercise it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, first of all, there has to be provision of education, and there has to be provision of quality education, and then you can impose this. So it is difficult. I think what the government can do is that it can begin to impose it in certain areas where there is sufficient provision, both by the public sector and the private sector, and to see that no child is out of school. Why are children out of school in Lahore? Why is a girl in Lahore not in school? Primarily because of poverty. It will not be any other reason, I can assure you. Why is a boy out of school in Lahore? It will again be poverty, because of labor. And many parents justify child labor. This is the sad thing that we have found out, that they say the children should be earning.
My next question is, how do you interpret education as free and compulsory, stated in the Constitution?
Well, free would mean that there is no cost to it for those who cannot afford it. So if you have a poverty level, then you provide all kinds of incentives, stipends, scholarships, free books like the government is doing at that level. Free would also mean that you should be able to study the books of your own choice. It should not be imposed that you are only going to study, for example, the books produced by the textbook board. Although the government has a multiple textbook policy, but it is not being implemented because it is being resisted by the textbook boards.
Yes, that means there should be multiple choices.
There should be multiple choice in the selection of the textbook. Selection of the textbook. Free would also mean that you should be able to study about all things. You should be able to study about other religions. You should be able to study about the human body. You should be able to get those skills which are necessary to improve the quality of life. You should have citizenship education. That means you should be able to function as a free individual in this society. That would be free. And compulsory would mean that the government ensures that facilities are available, and therefore parents are sending their children to school, whether in the private sector or the public sector or the non-formal sector.
To what extent you are optimistic that this will be translated into action?
That is a very difficult question. I have been working in this field of education for over 40 years now.
40 years.
I have taught for 25 years at a public sector university.
You have a long experience.
I have a long experience. I think what the only encouraging sign that I see is that people are exercising their choice where they can. So those who can afford to are sending their children to private schools. Not that the quality of the ordinary average gali mahalla private school is much better than that of your average government schools. And not all government schools are of poor quality either. Some are very good. So I think the hope lies in the fact that there are still some institutions of quality which I think need to begin to access other institutions of poorer quality. The hope lies in the fact that children want to go to school, that parents put their children into school. They are not averse to enrolling their children in school if a facility is available, but if nothing is happening in the school, and I think if the government needs to get its act together, without government we cannot rely on the private sector to fill the gap. It is impossible.
Are the public debates on education in these countries gender sensitive?
In which countries?
For example, we talk about Bangladesh, we talk about Pakistan, Muslim countries.
Oh, the debate is gender sensitive. But even so, what we find is that the focus is more on numbers at the moment. There is less focus, for example, on the barriers which are holding girls back from education. So that is, I think there is more open discussion in India, in Bangladesh, in Nepal as compared to Pakistan. Because in Pakistan we always come up against the religious, which I don't even call the religious, I would call the pseudo-religious mindset. Because we tend to use religion wherever it suits us. And we pick those aspects of religion out of context completely and impose them. So I think the debate is less open in Pakistan. We do try and make it more open. There have been programs. There is the Gender Reform Action Program in all provinces. There is the Gender Education Policy Support Program for which we have conducted a gender study on showing gender disparities at middle level and primary level to show what are the issues. So government does become aware, but it is unable to, for example, look at laws. If there is a sexual harassment law, the education department is not going to push that. Okay? If there is a case of sexual harassment, the education department should. But what we found, unfortunately, was that the education department does not have a gender policy. District governments do not have a gender policy in education. So they only